It is the final months of 1939. Europe is a powder keg. Adolf Hitler's Nazi war machine is terrorizing the continent, leaving Poland, France, and Great Britain trembling under its sheer power. But away from the chaos, deep within the frozen, monolithic walls of the Kremlin in Moscow, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin sits in complete isolation. He is calm, wearing a faint smile, and utterly secure in his calculations. Stalin is convinced he has pulled off the greatest diplomatic mastermind stroke in history. He has just orchestrated an alliance that stunned the entire world, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This was a formal non-aggression agreement between the Nazis and the Communists. Two bitter, ideological enemies who despised each other's existence were now sitting at the same table, redrawing the map of Europe. A sound effect, paper rustling, fountain pen signing, followed by the blinding flashes of press cameras. Narrator. But what was Stalin's true play? Did he actually trust a monster like Hitler? Not for a second. Stalin was thinking like a cold, cynical chess grandmaster. His grand strategy was simple: let the capitalist powers, Great Britain and France, lock horns with Hitler's Germany. Stalin wanted both sides to wage a war of attrition, tearing each other to pieces and draining their economies until they were completely exhausted. Then, and only then, Stalin planned to rise from the sidelines with his massive Red Army, sweep across a broken continent, and hoist the red hammer and sickle flag over all of Europe. Her music shifts, darker, aggressive tones. Narrator. The immediate price of this cynical pact was paid in blood by Poland. Moving swiftly, Hitler and Stalin jointly invaded the nation, carving it up like a prize. The sovereign countries of Eastern Europe were divided between the two dictators like pieces of cake. But Stalin went even further to keep the peace. Under the terms of the agreement, he committed to fueling the German Reich by supplying vast quantities of vital raw materials. Trains loaded with Soviet oil, grain, iron ore, and manganese rolled continuously into Germany. Unknowingly, Stalin was feeding the very beast that was destined to turn and try to swallow him whole. Act 2. The Hammer in Berlin, 3:37 o'clock. Sound effect, train wheels screeching violently on iron tracks, steam engine blowing a deafening whistle. Narrator. November 1940. Winter is tightening its grip on Europe. Sensing a shift in the political winds, Stalin sends one of the very few men he actually trusts straight into the belly of the beast, his foreign minister, Vyacheslav Molotov. In Russian, the name Molotov literally translates to the hammer. And he lived up to the title. In diplomatic circles, Molotov possessed an even more legendary nickname, Iron Ass. He earned this moniker due to his terrifying, superhuman ability to sit through grueling, marathon negotiation sessions lasting 14 to 16 hours without ever flinching, breaking his focus, or yielding an inch to his adversaries. He was brilliant, icy cold, merciless, and blindly loyal to the Soviet regime. A sound effect, footsteps echoing loudly in a grand, marble hall. Heavy wooden doors swinging open. Narrator. In Berlin, Molotov meets face-to-face with Adolf Hitler. The two men sit together, exchange pleasantries, and smile warmly for the international press. Hitler looks Molotov in the eye and assures him that the bond between Germany and the Soviet Union is unbreakable. But Molotov is completely blind to the reality unfolding around him. He is unaware that at the exact moment Hitler is shaking his hand, the Führer's military leaders are finalizing the blueprint for the utter annihilation of the Soviet Union. History would prove that Hitler was entirely capable of looking you in the eye, smiling, and promising peace while adjusting the dagger he was about to plunge into your spine. That was the grim reality of the theater taking place between Molotov and Hitler. Her music drops, suspenseful, low bass drone. Narrator. Just 1 month after Molotov returns to Moscow, on December 18, 1940, Hitler steps into his military headquarters and signs a top-secret document. It is titled Führer Directive No. 21. This is no ordinary military deployment. It is the official operational order for the largest, most violent, and most destructive land invasion in the history of human warfare. Its code name, Operation Barbarossa. Hitler's objective is total, uncompromising eradication. He seeks to smash the Soviet Union in a swift campaign, destroy the Red Army, execute its political leaders, and conquer the vast eastern territories to establish Lebensraum, living space, for his master race. In Hitler's eyes, the Slavic population is subhuman, destined only for extermination or slavery. Act 3. The Paranoid Dictator, 7 o'clock 10:30. Background music, fast-paced, chaotic, paranoid rhythm. Narrator. The opening months of 1941 arrive. Hitler is touring German weapons factories, inspecting cutting-edge panzers and artillery. Along the Soviet border, hundreds of thousands of German troops are quietly taking their positions. An operation of this magnitude is impossible to hide completely. Within days, red flags begin popping up across the Soviet intelligence network. Shocking, detailed reports land on Stalin's desk every single morning. The intelligence isn't just coming from one source, it is flooding in from every corner of the world. Soviet spies embedded deep within Berlin leak documents straight from Hitler's high command. The American military attaché in Moscow delivers an explicit warning regarding German troop movements. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill sends urgent, personal telegrams warning Stalin of an imminent strike. Most crucially, Stalin's master spy in Tokyo, Richard Sorge, uncovers the operation and transmits the exact date of the invasion and the precise number of German divisions. A sound effect, a violent hand slam on a wooden table, papers scattering across the floor. Narrator. But how does Stalin react? He dismisses the warnings entirely, branding them as garbage. Stalin's defining trait is his consuming paranoia, but in this critical hour, it works against him. He convinces himself that this mountain of intelligence is a sophisticated psychological warfare campaign orchestrated by Great Britain and the United States. Stalin believes Winston Churchill is trying to manipulate him into a premature, one-on-one war with the undefeated German Wehrmacht so that Britain can escape the war unscathed. Stalin knows the state of his own military. He knows the Red Army is in the middle of restructuring and is not yet ready to face the Germans. Terrified of provoking Hitler, Stalin orders his border forces to ignore the signs. He issues strict commands. Even if German troops cross the line or fly over the airspace, no one is to fire back. Military historians note that you can possess all the intelligence in the world, but if your mind is already hardwired to believe it is a lie, the information is completely worthless. Stalin's arrogance and fear have blinded him to the apocalypse charging toward his borders. Act 4. Apocalypse at dawn, 10:32 p.m. A sound effect. Complete silence, followed by the gentle, distant sound of chirping birds. Then, a sudden, earth-shattering explosion. Hundreds of artilleries firing simultaneously, fighter planes roaring through the sky. Narrator. June 22nd, 1941. Approximately 3:15 a.m. As the very first rays of dawn break over the endless fields of the Soviet border, the horizon suddenly erupts into a wall of fire. Without a formal declaration of war, without a single word of warning, Hitler drives his blade deep into Stalin's back. Operation Barbarossa is unleashed. It is an onslaught on a scale never before witnessed by mankind. The numbers alone are enough to stagger modern military strategists. Over 3 million German soldiers storm across the frontier. More than 3,000 panzer tanks tear through Soviet defenses, crushing everything in their path. Over 2,700 Luftwaffe aircraft black out the sky, raining fire and high explosives on sleeping cities. 7,000 artillery pieces and 600,000 motorized vehicles drive the unstoppable invasion forward. To put the sheer immensity of this front line into perspective, it is the geographic equivalent of launching a massive, synchronized military invasion across the entire United States, stretching all the way from San Diego to Seattle. It is a conflict so vast it defies imagination. A sound effect, a telephone ringing urgently, piercing the darkness of a quiet room. Narrator. In Moscow, the phone rings in Stalin's private bedroom. It is his chief of staff, General Georgy Zhukov, calling directly from the military command center. Stalin answers, his voice thick with sleep. On the other end, Zhukov's voice trembles. Comrade Stalin, German bombers are attacking our cities. The war has begun. What follows is a long, terrifying silence. Zhukov can hear nothing but the heavy, ragged breathing of the Soviet dictator. Stalin is completely paralyzed. His illusions, his calculated geopolitical strategies, his immense ego, all of it shatters into dust in an instant. Historical accounts suggest that Stalin fell into a deep, catatonic depression, locking himself away in his villa for days, refusing to see anyone as his empire burned. On the ground, the reality is a bloodbath. The leaderless Red Army is systematically encircled and slaughtered. Within the very first week, Nazi forces push 300 miles deep into Soviet territory. They surround major hubs like Minsk and Smolensk, capturing over 400,000 Soviet troops in massive pockets. The panzers are moving with such terrifying speed that global observers believe the fall of Moscow is only a matter of weeks away. Act 5. The Unexpected Ally, 2 p.m. 17:30. Background music, slow, heavy, tragic music, blending seamlessly into the sound of a howling, freezing blizzard wind. Narrator. 4 months of relentless, bloody warfare pass. October turns to November 1941. The vanguard of the German army is now close enough to see the spires of the Kremlin through their field binoculars. Hitler is entirely confident that the Soviet Union will collapse before the winter sets in. But right at the gates of the capital, the unstoppable Wehrmacht collides head-on with a terrifying new adversary, an enemy against whom they have no strategy, no training, and no defense. Russia's oldest, most brutal, and most loyal defender steps onto the battlefield, General Winter. The legendary, unforgiving Russian freeze arrives with a vengeance. Temperatures plummet to -20, -30, and eventually a staggering -40 degrees. Arrogant in their belief that the war would be won in the summer, German high command never issued winter uniforms to their men. Soldiers are left shivering in thin cotton clothes. The extreme cold freezes the diesel inside the panzers, jams the firing mechanisms of their rifles, and kills thousands of German soldiers due to hypothermia and severe frostbite. The invaders are freezing to death in their boots. Conversely, the Soviet soldiers and their rugged equipment are engineered specifically to survive and fight in these apocalyptic temperatures. A music shifts, a spark of hope, driving, rhythmic, and cinematic. Narrator. While the winter has slowed the German blitzkrieg, the threat to the nation remains critical. Stalin knows that a concentrated German push could still shatter Moscow's defenses. But in this darkest hour, a priceless piece of intelligence lands on his desk. This time, Stalin does not let his paranoia cloud his judgment. He listens. The report comes from Tokyo, sent by his legendary master spy, Richard Sorge, who has successfully infiltrated the highest echelons of the Japanese government. The message he sends alters the entire trajectory of World War II. The Tokyo intelligence. Japan will not attack the Soviet Union's eastern border in Siberia. The Japanese High Command has finalized its strategy. They are turning their sights completely to the south, preparing a massive strike against British, French, and Dutch colonies, and launching a surprise assault on the United States at Pearl Harbor. This single piece of information saves the Soviet Union. Relieved of the catastrophic threat of a two-front war, Stalin makes an immense, high-stakes military gamble. He orders the immediate withdrawal of his most elite, lethal, and heavily guarded forces stationed on the far eastern frontier and rushes them by train directly across the continent to defend Moscow. These are the legendary Siberian reserves. A sound effect, the heavy, rhythmic marching of thousands of boots crunching on thick snow, followed by the unified shouting of soldiers. Narrator. This is a fresh, untouched army of 400,000 soldiers. These are not raw conscripts. These are men born and raised in the brutal sub-zero wilderness of Siberia, fully accustomed to surviving and hunting in -40-degree conditions. They march onto the battlefield clad in heavy, specialized white parkas, rendering them practically invisible in the snow. They are highly trained ski troops, completely mobile in the deep drifts, and they come heavily equipped with brand new tanks, fresh artillery, and fully operational fighter wings. As the German forces stand frozen and depleted, Russia's White Army emerges from the blizzard like vengeful ghosts. Act 6. The Sledgehammer Counteroffensive, 17:38 p.m. Background music, epic, explosive, triumphant war theme. Narrator. December 5th, 1941. A blinding blizzard rages around the outskirts of Moscow. Huddled in their frozen trenches, starved and frostbitten, German soldiers are praying merely to survive the night, fully convinced that the Red Army is broken beyond repair. But suddenly, the icy silence of the morning is shattered as thousands of Soviet artillery pieces and Katyusha rocket launchers open fire simultaneously, lighting up the grey sky. Stalin has unleashed his great counteroffensive. Sound effect, deafening, non-stop explosions, screeching rockets firing in rapid succession, frantic, panic screaming in German. Narrator. Out of the blinding snowstorm, the Siberian ski troops charge forward. They strike the German lines with the force of a thunderbolt, shattering the Nazi perimeter within hours. For the first time since the war began, the vaunted Wehrmacht finds itself completely overwhelmed by a highly organized, heavily mechanized, and merciless counterattack. The invaders are exhausted, starving, out of ammunition, and lacking fuel. The sledgehammer blow is a spectacular success. The Soviet forces break the German momentum, throwing the invincible Wehrmacht back 100 to 150 miles from the capital. Hitler's grand dream of standing in Moscow's Red Square to declare total victory is buried forever beneath the Russian snow. The German high command is left completely stunned. This marks the very first major, catastrophic defeat of Nazi Germany on land in World War II. Moscow is saved. Against all mathematical odds, Stalin has preserved his empire and shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility before the eyes of the world. Her music softens, epilogue theme, reflective, grand, and solemn. Narrator. Operation Barbarossa, a campaign Hitler believed would be wrapped up in a matter of weeks, has transformed into a lethal, inescapable quagmire. Stalin's early arrogance, stubbornness, and refusal to believe his own intelligence cost the lives of millions of his citizens and pushed his nation to the absolute brink of extinction. Yet, by choosing to trust his intelligence network at the definitive moment and unleashing the unstoppable power of his Siberian reserves, he executed one of the greatest military comebacks in human history. The battle for Moscow was over, but the war was far from finished. This fateful winter turning point set the stage for a long, bloody road that would lead directly to the ruins of Berlin, where Hitler would eventually take his own life inside his bunker. But history will forever look back at the night of December 5th, 1941, as the moment when Russia's General Winter and Stalin's Siberian sledgehammer broke the back of the Nazi war machine and changed the world forever. Music fades out dramatically with a powerful, final drum beat.